So hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Hank Holland. Brooke and I, my wife, are thrilled to have you here, and it's a real honor for us to be able to host an event for the Congressman, Congressman Fleischmann. Thank you so much for being here. As I said, it's a real thrill to be here. And before we get started with the Congressman, I'd like to take a moment. Has Mayor Kevin Brooks, I don't believe he's arrived yet. I didn't miss him. I'd like to say a moment. There's some local leaders, many of whom are here, amongst Mayor Kevin Brooks, who I think will be here, and Gary Davis, who I know has a conflict. Amaero and myself and our team have just been welcomed into the Cleveland community and the Bradley County community, and we very, very much appreciate that. In addition to that, Doug Berry, where's Doug? Doug, Ross Tarver in the back, and Bob McCallie, a local developer who's not here. If it wasn't for the vision of the Cleveland and Bradley County Economic Development Team, the Industrial Board, partnering with a local developer, Bob McCallie, again, we would not be here. And enormously grateful for the foresight. Because of that, it's resulted in significant capital investment in this community, significant jobs. We will end up having full-time about 150 employees at Amaero. But I was speaking out of the contract. I believe we've employed about 200 people so far, all local subs, doing the work of this facility. And it's been a real privilege to do so. Turning to Congressman Chuck Fleischmann, it's an absolute pleasure, as I said, for Brooke and I to host this event. I believe that we as a country are at a critical juncture. And I think we're at a critical juncture in a lot of ways. We've seen the social fabric of our communities torn in many ways, what's happened in recent years. We've got national security threats to our country. I would argue not the likes of which we haven't seen since the Bay of Pigs or the Cuban Missile Crisis. And back then, the difference was we had a single adversary, right? And today we've got adversaries in Russia and China and North Korea and Iran. It's on all different fronts. And on top of that, we've got a lot of economic challenges in this country, not the least of which I happen to be very passionate about. We destroyed 7.1 million highly skilled, high-paying manufacturing jobs. And it's the reason I'm as committed as I am to Amaero. Is I think in a small way we can make a difference. And I think it's a big, big deal for the future of our country. And I say all that as a preface in that, it's critical that we have principled, committed, successful, effective leaders in Washington. And I think we have a lot of them, and we have a lot that perhaps aren't as effective as maybe we'd like to see. But certainly we've got a real champion in Congressman Chuck Fleischmann. And again, thank you for taking the time to be here. Brenda, thank you very much for being here as well. First elected in 2010, he has served with honor and distinction for 8 terms. First ran in 2010, I believe that there was a Republican field of 11, including the state chair, who I suspect she was favored, not you, I'm guessing, when you began that campaign. Every election since then is won by a significant majority, I believe by 65% or more.
Thank you.
For those subsequent elections. Chuck was raised in New York City, Philadelphia, and Chicago, was the first in his family to go to college, graduated with Phi Beta Kappa and cum laude honors in political science at University of Illinois, and began law school at 20 years old at University of Tennessee. And I believe if my math was right, a year before you graduated, you and Brenda moved to Chattanooga or thereabout,
86,
and started your law practice. It was in 2010, as I mentioned, that he ran for Congress. Today is on the Appropriation Committee and chairs the Energy and Water Development Committee. Has been a absolute principled fiscal and social conservative, a defensive hawk, a reliable supporter of Israel, a proponent of the Second Amendment rights, and a pro-life advocate, amongst many other things. And again, we're fortunate to have a champion like you, Congressman, in this area. Thank you for all that you've done. I thought I'd let the Congressman say a few words, and then we would just open up a conversation, given all that is going on in Washington today. And then again, the Congressman's been kind to welcome your questions.
Hank, thank you very much. Brooke, thank you so much for opening up this beautiful Amaero facility. My gosh, when I think of where Bradley County is today, compared to where it was, it's always a beautiful place. I see my dear friend Ross Tarver back there. I think I sat with you in 2009 when I was thinking about running, and met at a barbecue place, and what you all have done is incredible. But thank you. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for doing business in Bradley County in the great state of Tennessee. Our state is not only open for business, we cherish business. No state income tax, low regulations. It consistently is in the top 3, if not the top state for attracting businesses. Let's face it, Amaero could have gone anywhere in the country, but it chose Tennessee. I hear that story time and time again. A very little bit about me. I was elected in 2010. I had practiced law with my wife in Chattanooga for 24 years. I did start law school at the ripe old age of 20 in Knoxville, Tennessee. By 23, I had a law degree, a wife, a law firm, and I was ready to go. I worked hard, I played by the rules, and fortunately, 24 years later, 3 sons later, there was an open congressional seat. Now, I'm going to open up for some questions, but I was one of those kids that was very competitive. I was a very good athlete. I was a very good baseball player. Now, Ross, I was not a very good basketball player or a good boxer for some reasons there. But the reality was I was good at baseball and football and golf, tennis. I love sports, but I was always very competitive, and I still am very competitive. When I went to Congress, I knew our country was at a very, very difficult turning point. It was right after 2 years of President Obama. This was in that big Republican wave. But I won a very difficult Republican primary, but this was a very, and still is a very safe Republican seat. But the reality was, Senator Alexander came to me and said, Chuck, have you ever thought about being on the Appropriations Committee? We didn't have anybody on appropriations in the House then. I said, Senator, why? He said, how many times do administration officials return your phone calls? I summarily told him, never. And I was telling the truth. He said, you go on appropriations, I promise you, they will return your phone call that day. Truer words have never been spoken. As a matter of fact, this week I will be meeting with President Trump one-on-one in his office. So after this event, there's a plane waiting. I'm going to go to Washington, D.C., so I can get there and actually meet with the President of the United States. What do I do in Congress? I'm an appropriator. Of all 9 members in our great delegation, Republican and Democratic, I'm the only member on the Appropriations Committee. On that committee, I chair the Energy and Water Subcommittee. I'm on the Defense Appropriations Committee and on Labor, Education, Health, and Human Services. I can look everyone in the eye and say I've got the very best hand in Congress of anybody on the Appropriations Committee. That just does not happen. That happens because we're competitive. I work with people. I fight only when I have to fight, and I would prefer to work with people to get things done. I've been able to help fund the Chickamauga Lock, to help bring $10 billion a year into the Oak Ridge Reservation that has partnered with the great city of Chattanooga and now with Bradley County as well. Bottom line, I work tirelessly. I work 7 days a week. I still love what I do, but one of the reasons, probably the most important reason, Hank, that I'm successful is I represent great people. When you think of the fact, now, when I sit down with the Defense Secretary and I can talk to him about what Amaero is doing, the only company that's doing what it's doing in this space in the United States, that's incredible. So think about it. If we were playing poker, I've been dealt a royal flush. If I can't play that royal flush, then I need to be replaced. I represent great people who are doing great things every day in 10 counties. So I'll work hard. I work with our friends in the Senate. I work with our friends across the aisle when it makes sense to do so, because I really believe, as my hero, who I met in 1982 at the Palmer House Hotel in Chicago, Ronald Reagan, said to me, our greatest days are ahead of us and not behind us. I fervently believe that. When I meet with young people who play with all these gadgets and technology, I am blown away. When I see seniors who are in their 80s coming back to work with the Department of Energy and giving back of their expertise. I say thank you. You could retire or you can keep giving back. We need everyone, young, middle-aged, older. We need men, women. We need people from all walks of life if we are going to win. And we are winning. But Hank, you hit it on the head. It's a competitive world. China is our number one competitor and adversary. No question about that. Russia is still dangerous. They still have the largest nuclear arsenal in the world. But other countries that are even friendly to us have gotten very competitive, and they've gotten good at what they do. So America is actually going through a great renaissance, a manufacturing renaissance, a technological renaissance, and I think there is abundant optimism out there. One of the reasons I get up every day and work so hard is I believe in the best of people and the best of things. I could sit there and complain. You turn on the news, you'll see some bad things. Sure you will. I'm a realist. But the reality is, if we look at things and work together and bring our assets together and collaborate and work hard, there is nothing that we can't do, whether it's curing cancer, rebuilding our nuclear arsenal, making sure that energy is going to be abundant, not only today, but for generations to come. And thank you, I will say this, at this event, you all give me the tools necessary, the resources necessary, not only to stay in my seat, but to make sure that we stay in the majority. If we do not hold the House of Representatives, I am no longer Chairman of Energy and Water. I'm what we call in D.C. a ranking member. I'm what we call in common parlance honorable mention, okay? Right now, I write the energy and water bill for the House. If I'm in the minority, I get very small input. So what you're doing tonight at this event means so much to me, so much to Brenda. I also take those resources and help Republicans get elected from Maine, New York, California, Illinois, Texas, Florida, wherever they need help. So your help helps me do my job better for you all. And with that, Hank, thank you so much. Brooke, thank you so much.
With every day, share some insights on how difficult it is to govern today. What is our prospect of getting some real legislation done over the next year and a half?
Well, Hank, you're absolutely right. In the first Trump term, we did have the House, but we were in a very different position right then. First of all, it was the first Trump term. It was very difficult to get things done. We did get that tax bill done. We repealed certain parts of Obamacare, not all of it, but it took a while for us to get going as a conference. Right now, we are in a much better position, but the reason we stalled the first time, candidly, is out of respect for something that's in the other body, that's in the United States Senate, that I actually do support. It is called the filibuster. And let me touch on that. In the House, it is a matter of numbers. So if you're in the majority in the House and you've got more than them, you are going to win most battles, okay? In the Senate, it's very different. If you recall, the House has always been elected directly every 2 years by the public. The United States Senate, in our founding, was originally an appointed body. We amended our Constitution in the last century to make senators elected by the populace. That was a major change. And the change that we did, and we amended our Constitution so it's the law, means that senators now are in a position where they have to answer every 6 years to the public. What has happened in that regard? The Senate is supposed to be a buffer. So they came up with a rule. It's not in the Constitution, but it's a rule. It's called the filibuster. For most things, you need 60 votes to get anything done. Somebody confirmed and the like. So you could pass something by 30 votes in the House or 1 vote in the House, and we've done them both. If you can't get 60 votes in the Senate, most of the time that will be dead on arrival. Big exception, something called reconciliation. We've all read and heard about the big, beautiful bill. Why is that so important? Because we're using a tool called reconciliation that's available 1 time a year. So we're going to have 2 shots at it in this Congress. That means you don't need to have the filibuster rule. You can get it passed with a majority, 51. Right now, the Senate has 53, okay? We have the vice president who will break tie votes, So in effect, you've almost got an extra vote there if it were 50-50. So we can only lose 4 senators. We passed the big, beautiful bill with the idea that the Senate will use reconciliation. We passed that by 1 vote. I voted for that. The Senate will change that bill, hopefully vote on it, but they won't need 60. So the big things that are out there, tough to get done because it's tough to get 60 votes in the Senate. Having said that, I do support the filibuster. We're seeing some people in the other party who said, oh, they wanted to get rid of the filibuster. Thank God, Senator Manchin and your senator from Arizona, goodness gracious, what's her name? No, what's her name? Oh, goodness.
You're here.
Help me.
Mark Kelly and,
She retired.
Yeah.
They stood up and said, we're going to keep the filibuster. Okay.
Cinema.
Yeah. Cinema, who I served with in the House.
Yeah.
Very nice. True independent. But the reality is they kept the filibuster. I think we need that so that the Senate still can act as a buffer because the House acts sometimes very rapidly. So to answer your question, can we get things done? Yes. We have already passed some key legislation, but the key will be is how successful will we be with reconciliation? The key part of reconciliation is tax policy. We have got to keep those tax policies, keep taxes low on businesses and lower on hardworking individuals. It's not a boon for the rich. Rich have their money. It's the hardworking people like Hank and I that worked our way up and Ross basically our whole lives and make sure that we can keep more of our resources so that we can invest that in our families and in our communities and out of the hands of the federal government.
And I fully agree with filibuster. We will be the minority again.
It could happen.
It will happen. We will be the minority at some point in the future. And I think that to do away with the filibuster might be expedient, but probably short-sighted. You talked about reconciliation. So the House is now passed by 1 vote, as you said, the big, beautiful bill. It goes to the Senate for deliberation. In the current reconciliation bill, which began with Chairman Wicker and Chairman Calvert, we've got $150 billion of incremental spending for Department of Defense. The expectation is in FY26, that'll take the total defense spending over $1 trillion, about a 12% increase over FY25. Do you think it's promising that we do, in fact, have a defense budget on the order of $1 trillion? And do you think the priorities that the administration has laid out, largely hypersonics, missile defense, submarine industrial base, AI, unmanned, is there support within Congress for those same priorities?
Another excellent question. Now, I'm going to be as objective as I can as a Republican, okay? But I want to lay out for you some of the differences that are out there. Most Republicans overwhelmingly support a stronger, higher defense budget, okay? Many Democrats support the defense budget, but they want dollar for dollar, and they will tell you this, for non-defense discretionary. So everything that is non-defense. In our subcommittees, there are 12. I sit on 3, Defense, Labor H, and I chair Energy and Water. But there are 12 of these buckets of these subcommittees. What the Democrats always push for is raising non-defense discretionary, okay, and saying we want dollar for dollar with defense. They're never going to get that, but the reality is over the past few years, non-defense discretionary spending has increased, okay? Now, some of that I support, cancer research and things like that. There are some areas of common agreement. There are other areas, though, well, when you're in a tight fiscal budget, remember, we're $36 trillion in debt, in national debt, and our budgets keep going up year after year. So what I think will probably happen is we will pass a defense appropriation bill in the House. The Senate, with reasonably good bipartisan support, will support defense. Why is it so important, though? That's the reason I think we need to look at this. China is aggressive. They are working very hard at developing what we have. It's what we call a triad. That is our nuclear arsenal. For us, it's land-based missiles, it's air missiles, and it's submarines. And I know your company's doing some great work for the Navy on submarines. Fantastic. The reality is we live in a dangerous world. We've seen what's happened in Russia and Ukraine, where we've had terrible, terrible carnage, out and out war that we hope that gets resolved soon. Other countries have also developed a strong nuclear arsenal. Many countries that are friendly to us, India and Pakistan, have long had well-established nuclear arsenals. Unfortunately, North Korea, we allowed North Korea to get into that space, and they're dangerous. Not even the Chinese can control them, and they're both communist nations, and they're both supposed to be allies. So the bottom line is you've got that. Then we look at planes like the F-35. I speak all over the country, sometimes all over the world. Brenda goes with me. When we go and we see things like the F-35, I want you to know this. As strong as Russia and China may be, they are at least 10 years behind us with the F-35. That airplane is incredible. There is nothing like it. Many of our allies are flying it. It is top notch. So we are winning in some areas, but the reality is we've got to make sure that the men and women who are fighting for us have the best training, have the best arms, have the best opportunities, that their families feel that they can actually stay in the military more than 1 or 2 terms, because a lot of families basically say, I need to get out because it's just difficult living conditions. So that takes dollars, that takes resources. Do I think we will get there? Yes. President Trump has made defense spending one of his #1 priorities. We have fallen behind. And one of the reasons we fall behind, candidly, and this is a bipartisan failure, Republican, Democrat, and the few independents. When we don't pass a budget, remember, I write the energy and water bill for the House. When we don't pass that and it doesn't come into law, we end up with what we call a continuing resolution. That means a replay of the last year's budget. That cripples defense. Whether it's the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, they all tell us continuing resolutions hurt our readiness. We had a continuing resolution last year. This year, we have got to work hard to pass a budget. It's going to be difficult. The fiscal year ends September 30th. I'm in the process now of writing the energy and water bill. My friends are writing the defense appropriation bill. I don't mind telling you all this. We are putting in a request for Amaero in the defense appropriations bill, which is long overdue. Okay, they've done their work. Congress shouldn't do its. So we're glad to help your team in that regard.
Thank you, Congressman. Thank you very much. Speaking about fiscal responsibility, right? Getting our house in order. The cost of our debt service today exceeds our defense budget. Remarkable statistic, right? Yep. That it's changed so quickly. If you look at the federal expenditures before COVID, which was only 5 years ago, federal expenditures have increased by 50%. 50% since COVID, most of which was the year after COVID, right? And we know the government very seldom cuts expenses, right? When we go in these expenses. And of course, the challenge that you have is so many of these expenditures are non-discretionary, right? And thus somewhat formulaic, and the bucket you have from quit is small.
Thank you.
An American family making $100,000 can't spend $140,000 every year, and yet our government does, right? We spend about 40% more than our revenues every single year. It almost seems impossible, right, given the small amount of non-discretionary spending, right, versus discretionary spending that we have. What are your thoughts on this? And as we think about our kids and our grandkids, on one hand, we've got to fund these priorities. On the other hand, if you look at the cost of our debt, if you look at debasement of our currency and other things, how do we eventually end this cycle?
Hank, you've probably asked the most important question that you could ask in this room or any other room around the country. And the question is, where is our spending? Where is it going? And why are we in this position? So thank you. There are 2 forms of spending. One is called discretionary. So when people go around and say, hey, Congressman Fleischmann, he serves on the very powerful House Appropriations Committee and he's a cardinal and all that, they're telling the truth. But the reality is I'm only controlling between 20 to 25%, at most 1/4 of the federal budget. Where is the rest of the federal budget coming from, and where is it driving our debt? Mandatory spending. So I'm going to define mandatory spending. Mandatory spending, whether I had a Democrat here, Republican here, and an independent here, we all use the same definition. So there's no politics involved in this. There's politics in the decision as to how to deal with that, but we all have to have the right definition. The reality is discretionary spending, mandatory spending automatically happens. We don't appropriate for it. It happens automatically every year. What is that? Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, interest on the national debt, and some other programs that Congress has chosen, I think unwisely, to tuck in under mandatory spending. Why do they do that? Because if they tuck it in and it's a pet project for somebody, it automatically happens the next year. It is not subject to appropriations. Sometimes that's a good idea, but when it's mandatory and it automatically recurs. In 1980, when my friend Hal Rogers came to Congress, 75%, maybe even 80% of all spending was discretionary. Defense, education, energy, okay? The things that I appropriate for. 80-20, it's flipped around to 75-25 mandatory versus discretionary. Why? Because we have more people like me, 62, other people going on the rolls of Social Security every day. And guess what? For the next probably 5 to 10 years, that's going to continue. If we're just in an age, it's a numbers situation. So what we're going to have to do is figure out, as discretionary gets squeezed, how we can basically be fiscally wise on that side of the ledger and use those dollars in a way that makes sense. That's why we have to get tighter fiscally and the like. That's why it's so important when we look at the big three. We can't touch Social Security. We're not going to scare anybody. Sometimes Democrats, they're going to take this away. We're not. We're not going to touch Medicare, but we are going to have to touch Medicaid. Why? We want to make sure that the waste, fraud, and abuse that's out there gets dealt with, and work requirements. There are people getting Medicaid benefits that are able-bodied and should work. That is actually addressed in the big, beautiful bill. The politics of that are that the Republicans support that. Most Democrats do not. I'm not picking on either side. But when you're looking, where are you going to save money, you've got to be careful. Because neither side is going to come up and say, we're going to take grandma's Social Security check. It's not going to happen. And if you hear that talk out there, it's just pure political rhetoric intended to scare. So we've got to look at that. At some point in time, maybe we can make some changes to make the system stronger, okay? And that's going to take bipartisan agreement. The best people to ask is people who are retired members of Congress. When they're no longer there and no longer voting, they come up with the right solutions. But guess what? They don't have to vote for it, and they don't have to stand before their constituents. So we, the people, are going to have to make that decision. But let me say this, we're $36 trillion in debt. That is going to continue regardless because of the mandatory spending programs. I'm going to leave you with one other statistic that should wake you up at night. If we did away with every single penny of discretionary spending, that means defense, education, energy, we'd still run a deficit based on mandatory spending. That's how staggering those numbers are. So that,
which, by the way, to that point, I believe the only way out is economic growth.
yes,
The only way out is economic growth.
we cannot tax our way. And again, I have Democratic friends, so I'm not here to pick on anybody, but they'll sit there. I've got a friend of mine that's a nuclear engineer. He co-chairs nuclear caucuses with me. He comes to the Republican club and eats dinner with me. He's a nice man, except when he talks politics. And he will sit there and literally, with a straight face, say that we can tax our way out of this. We cannot. We've got to grow our way out of it. We've got to have economic growth in all sectors. And that is why, when I see President Trump this week, I'm going to thank him so much, because if we grow our economy, and this is not me talking, this is Jack Kennedy, this is Dr. Lawford, this is Ronald Reagan. If we grow that pie and basically have more economic growth, even with lower tax rates, the Treasury is going to get more money because of the growth. So I want to see us grow that pie, have more people succeed, have people come out of poverty, and have that chance for the American dream, which I did, which Hank did, which many of us in this room did. I don't want to punish success.
So agree. So one more topic, and then we'll open up the conversation. It happens to be one that I'm very passionate about. The Berlin Wall came down, and in Washington, we had a Last Supper, as it's referred to. And we called together the defense primes, of which we had 51 at the time. And we said we can no longer afford to support the defense industrial base. We can no longer afford to support all these primes. Fast forward today, we have 5 primes. No longer 51 primes, but we have 5 primes. Moreover, we're spending the least amount of GDP as a percent of GDP that we have on defense since Second World War.
That's correct.
So yes, we spend a lot of money on defense. Hopefully it will be $1 trillion. As a percent of our economy, it's at a trough level. If you look at manufacturing, we've destroyed, I like to say, or we lost 7.1 million highly skilled, high-paying jobs. I'm of the view the reason we have the president we have is very simple, whether you like him or you don't like him. Those jobs we destroyed weren't in New York. They weren't in California. Those jobs we destroyed were in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Ohio, Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, North Carolina. It is why we have the president we have. Can we bring back all those 7.1 million jobs? Maybe not. I can tell you we've hired incredible young people at Amaero that are very, very talented and eager to work in manufacturing. What can we do to create and to incentivize a manufacturing renaissance in this country? And no, we're not talking about making socks, but we are talking about forging. We are talking about making electronics and semiconductors and high-value manufacturing.
Another excellent question. First of all, a profound thanks to President Trump. Confession time. My party used to be the party of free trade, okay? The Democratic Party used to be the party of protectionism. And what I mean by protectionism, I'm talking about tariffs and protecting American workers' jobs. Do you remember NAFTA? Who fought it? The Democrats. Who pushed for it? The Republicans. What was the net? We lost American manufacturing jobs. When I'm going through a factory in the 3rd District of Tennessee, it could be a place that makes widgets. It could be a place that basically coats telephone poles. I've been in both. I go up and down that line. And what do these workers on the line say to me? I can sit there and tell them all the wonderful things I've done for the 3rd District and be telling them the truth. And I do always tell the truth about that. You know what their question is for me? Where are you on Trump? Well, I'm for him. Then go away, mister. Where for you? Okay? It's that simple. He's fighting for their jobs, and they know that. Our party has had a switch. We used to sit around and say, well, okay, if a factory leaves, so bad, too bad, so sad. They'd make it somewhere else, get those cheap goods back. Donald Trump does not want that to happen. He has totally changed that dynamic and made our party the party that is fighting for working people, and they know it. I see that with union workers and the like. Yes. Now, how do we fix things, okay? Tariffs is only part of the solution. It just can't be tariff, tariff, tariff. What you've got to have is skilled education for the trades. I was one of those kids, if I may, was pretty good with a book. And I did well. And I did well in college. I got 2 majors. I got a law degree, and I was fortunate. But I can remember being in shop class, and my mother, who passed in 1977, was still living. So there's had to be probably at about 75 or 76. I came back from shop class, metal shop, wood shop, and we had one other shop. I forgot. I think it was engine shop, with the god ugliest looking thing that you could make. She thought it was beautiful. She thought it was the best thing in the world. But I wasn't handy, and I'm still not handy. Brenda will tell you, don't fix anything. He's awful. It's true. Someday I'll learn that. I'm 62. But the reality is I sat with men and ladies who could take things and make things with their hands. You know what used to happen in the 70s? They'd say, oh, we have to take those kids and put them over here. You're going to have to work in the trades. Well, what we need to do today in America, and what I do every chance I get, is if I have one of those students who has that skill set, I say, thank you. Your skill set is every much as important as my skill set, maybe even more so. So the reality is we've got to make sure that we cherish people who are good with their hands and trades. We've got to give them educational opportunities. Our state does that better than anywhere else. Hank, you can get 2 years free education because of the way that we're set up in a certified trade school or junior college. So that's part of it. Cherish it, fund it, teach it. Tax law. We've got to make sure that the tax code is favorable. That's why we need to pass this big, beautiful bill. Forget about some of the stuff that's on the side, okay? I know our northern friends want SALT tax deductions and things like that. We can argue that on either side. But the reality is we've got to keep that core base in place so that companies will continue to invest and grow. If we continue to grow that base, if we continue to grow our technology, working with our scientists, bring everyone to the table, our chemists, everyone's got a wonderful skill set. We need to grow more of that. I'm going to say something else that sometimes gets my hand spanked a little bit, but I think I'm right. We educate in this country a lot of people who come from other lands. They come to the best institutions in the world. They get skilled. We've got to find a way to keep them in this country. Corporate America keeps telling me, please, why train these people, force them out of our country, and where do they go? Russia, China, sometimes back to their country of origin. If we can find a way to keep those skilled laborers here that we've trained, that will also help us. So we've got to have some reforms, but bottom line, we've got to make it friendly for business. We've got to make it friendly for investment. I want to see people who invest in companies like Amaero do well. I don't want them to be punished for that. One of the biggest things, I had a lot of problems, candidly, with President Obama. He was always very nice to me, but on a philosophical level, he would literally say, if you've done something well in America and you succeeded, you hurt somebody. Well, no, you didn't hurt somebody. You helped people. You employed people. You worked hard. Now, are there some bad people out there? Sure they are. And we can work on that and get it better. But the reality is most of Americans' entrepreneurs are hardworking people. They play by the rules. They want to see a better life for themselves, for their families, and like Ross Tarver and you, Hank, for their communities. They give back and they give back and give back. Hank right here could have retired probably 10 years ago, but no, he stayed in the game. Brendan and I have a friend up in Oak Ridge, could have sold his business out for 25, 30, maybe $40 million. He said, no, I want to stay in the game. Why? To keep giving back. He's forgotten. He doesn't know how much money he's worth, but it doesn't matter anymore. He still wants to keep giving back. That's what I think we need to do in this country. And again, that's where Donald Trump is. That's his heart. That's his head. His rhetoric sometimes, we'll leave that where it is. What you see is what you get. When you're one-on-one with him, and Brendan knows that, he likes Brenda a lot more than he does me. That probably shows good taste. We've sat and talked with him, and he'll just say, you're all right, but I like her. I like her. True story. And he says, you're going to get the best hat in America. Why? Because it's his. So, and he gave her a hat, and I didn't get a hat. Maybe this week I'll get a hat.
Fantastic. Where's Melissa? What time is it? I love my watch. I apologize.
Who got time?
6:05. All right. He literally has to catch a plane to go meet with the president. We're going to take 15 minutes. Would love and welcome your questions. Please speak up so we can hear you. And then we're going to let the congressman and Brenda get on their way.
Ask me anything you like. Now, I am a good athlete. I will say this. I've been the MVP on the baseball team. You can look it up. So I've gotten that done.
Catcher?
I'm left-handed. So they've got me in the outfield and playing first. Yes. Yes, sir.
First, I'd like to thank what you're doing at EC, because every time I hear you talk, you're always working across the aisle. You're always in out there at best interest. I wish more people on both sides of the aisle did that when I appreciate it. My question is, I know we're trying to bring jobs back onto the U.S., and you just can't build up a company overnight. It's going to take 3 years to get
Yes.
section. So, Amaero did this overnight, but that's the exception. I heard the head of TBA say they have 90 years of work to do in 30 years in order to meet power demand 2024. They're short 7,000 workers. We all need skilled workers as business owners. What is the government doing to try to encourage? We got about 2 or 3 year window to manufacture itself back up. It knows even increase it and the skilled workers we all need to run our manufacturing.
JJ, you get the award for the second best question. You had the first on the deficit. I got to be, but energy, energy, energy. I speak all over the world, all over our great country about energy. But the reality, usually nuclear. But after Brenda was at one of my speeches, she says, wait a second, you've got to tell that audience, why is it so important what you do? I'm America's energy congressman. I chair 8 caucuses. I do work with Republicans and Democrats. I'm getting younger Democrats actually involved in new nuclear. I'm never going to get the old Democrats, okay? Warren and Pelosi and Markey, they will never join me. But I had a young Democrat from Massachusetts come the other day and said, sign me up. I want to be in your caucus. I said, have you talked to your senators lately? He said, they're wrong. We need clean, reliable nuclear power because we need more energy in this country than we're producing. Now, for about 20 years, we were flat. Demand was flat. TVA, and I'm a supporter of TVA, would come in and basically say something along these lines. We've got enough energy. We're okay. We don't need more energy on the grid. That has totally changed, whether it's in TVA's portfolio, Southern Company, Duke, you name it. America and the world is going to have a voracious appetite for energy. And if we don't get there, we're going to have a situation, and I've heard this in other states, where companies come in and they say, we want to come into your state. The first person they go to is their utility. And they said, can you give us the power? Can you imagine an American utility looking at a prospective employer and say, I'm sorry, I may not be able to service your energy needs in 5 or 10 years. So what we've got to do is look at our portfolio. I like TVA's portfolio. It is now 47% nuclear. We've got about 12% hydro. There's some coal. We're building natural gas plants. I've got to say this, and I'm America's nuclear congressman, but we need natural gas. Natural gas is abundant. It's very easy to build these plants, and that's going to be our bridge energy until we can get nuclear where it's at. What can we do with nuclear? We've got new designs for what we call smaller reactors, but SMRs and advanced reactors and microreactors. But the reality is, thank goodness, we just put 2 big reactors at Vogtle, Southern Company, back in working. Company called Holtec is in Michigan, basically starting an old nuclear power plant, going to bring it back to life. 3 Mile Island, I don't know how many of y'all remember that, but the good reactor at 3 Mile Island is going to be restarted. It's reliable, it is safe. And this week when I speak with the president wants new nuclear and the like, but one of his questions that he has had in the past is going to be on safety. I will be able to answer those questions, and whether it's the president of the United States or the poor hobo on the corner, I'm not going to lie to them. It's going to be, Mr. President, we need safe fuels, we need safe operation, and we've got that, and we've got to deal with the spent nuclear fuel. America doesn't reprocess it. The French, the Russians, the Chinese, they reprocess it. I'm working with people who will do that. So it's going to take public-private partnerships. I do believe the federal government has a role in funding some of these things. I get in trouble again with some of my friends who are further to the right than me and say, no, I don't want to spend money on that. And I don't want to spend money on this. And I get that, okay? I respect that. But we have got to have a federal investment in some of these first-of-a-kind technologies, because that first one's going to be expensive. But guess what? I promise you that 10th one and that 100th one will not be as expensive, and we've got to win that fight. So we need more energy. I sit with my progressive friends and say, look, I'm not against solar, okay? Solar can be part of it, but we can never, ever get there with just solar. Great
And
question.
yet again, this is a national security and an economic policy issue.
Yes.
I mean, again, what attracted Amaero to Tennessee? You've got a 140 megawatt substation dedicated to this industrial park that Doug and Ross and the mayors put in place, right? Amaero wouldn't have come here otherwise, right? We've got amongst the cheapest electricity in the country, but more abundancy, we've got abundance of power.
Yep.
We can get access to a transformer, right? It is an enormous asset for the state of Tennessee and where we sit. We're working with a company that we hope to co-locate near us. It would take about 500,000 square feet. It's one of the primary things that would potentially bring them here is this issue. And the other issue that I would add, and I do think that nuclear it has to be a big part of our solution.
Yes.
I was with a group in December during the Trump transition team working on policy. It included the CEO of Anthropic, an AI company. It was an amazing statistic they said. They said AI alone, the data centers we're building for AI, in 2030, but 5 years away, would consume 40% of the entire power generation in the U.S. today in 5 years, right? And this is why it's a national security issue as much as it's an economic policy issue.
We have to do what we did in the Manhattan Project. I represent the great city of Oak Ridge. Real quick, but great story. General Groves was given the task by President Roosevelt to come to the Valley to build the Manhattan Project so that we could basically make enough uranium, hopefully to create a weapon that would hopefully end the war before the Germans got there. You've all seen Oppenheimer. There's another great movie out there called The Catcher is a Spy that I think is even better. But the reality is General Groves shows up and he goes to TVA and he says, I need a bunch of power in Oak Ridge to do something I can't tell you about. And the head of TVA says, I'm so sorry. We're building tanks and planes in a place called Alcoa, Tennessee. And they were. So I can't give you this. The general persisted. He said, you don't understand. I need all this power because I'm basically going to do something that's going to win the war. He said, General, go away. Now you're starting to bother me. He says, I'll make it easy for you. Unless you have a letter from President Roosevelt telling me to do this, I'm not going to do it. He summarily reaches into his pocket from FDR to the head of TVA. Give this man anything he asked for. He got it done and we got it done. So my point is, give our country what we need to get it done. We can generate this energy, but we've got to use all of our resources. And we have got to get to a point, literally, where we've got to permit quicker. We've got to stop these crazy lawsuits. Look, I believe in the environment more than anyone. I chair the Nuclear Cleanup Caucus. I go into communities all over the United States and clean up legacy sites, and I'm proud of it. From Oak Ridge to Hanford, Washington, to Paducah, to Savannah River, to Los Alamos. Real stories. But the reality is you can't put your head in the sand and stop this progress, because if they do, if they win, we will lose. Please, questions. This is good. Any political questions? Yes, sir. Tell us who you are. Yes.
Thank you for your efforts, UPC, to representing us. I love the fact that Doge is now a verb and it's common in the vernacular across the U.S. Your opinion, I'm curious for your perspective, is Doge a 2-year finite exercise, or is it changing the culture of Europe?
And how do we legislate it?
It's an excellent question. Okay, when we appropriate dollars, when I appropriate dollars, that's my job. I basically take dollars with my friends on the Appropriations Committee in the House and the Senate, and we give it to the administration, whether it's a Democratic or a Republican administration, and then they decide how to spend it. The upside of Doge was, and I don't know how many of you watched President Trump's joint his speech to Congress. It wasn't a State of the Union, joint session to Congress this year. He went through and said some of the things we were spending money on in this country. And I write fiction. I couldn't make some of that stuff up. I would have said, no, never in America. I mean, it was shocking. And everybody kind of sat there and said, oh, well. So is it working? Yes. We've got to go out and it's not just waste, fraud, and abuse. Where are we spending dollars? We don't need to spend dollars to find out how the LGBT community in Syria is doing, okay? I don't wish anybody ill, okay? I wish them well, but we don't need to be spending dollars, American dollars, when we're in deficit on stuff like that. So is it here to stay? Probably, but it's Congress's duty. Let me put up both hands. You all should be looking at me and say, hey, Congress should be doing its proper job on oversight. There was a decision by the United States Supreme Court in its last term that overruled what we call the Chevron doctrine. What it basically did is it took some of the power that the executive branch over the years had taken from Congress, okay, and kept it and gave it back to Congress. So we should be doing our job and having oversight hearings to say, where are you spending your money? How are you spending your money? What's it been spent on? And we demand answers. So it's a process. It's going to take a while to fix. So it's more than waste, fraud, and abuse. Is Doge here to stay in some form or other? Yes. There were things over the years that I thought, like the line item veto that many governors have, that we gave to President Clinton. The United States Supreme Court struck it down. I have to respect that as a constitutionalist, okay? I didn't agree with the decision. I remember having a talk with the late Justice Antonin Scalia before he passed away. I am a lawyer, and we were talking about what the line item veto would have meant, that a president could go through and basically strike out things that he or she would say was wrong spending. So it's a process. Ultimately, I think we need to go to the American people and be honest with them about where we're spending the money, how we're spending it, and if they don't want it spent that way, that we change it. So we're in a better position than we were, but we have a long way to go. But truth be known, unless we address mandatory spending, we're never going to get there.
I think one of the benefits of Doge is it shines the light on things.
Yep.
Right? At least it shows the American people what some of these things are that we're spending their money on. Ross,
you got to have something to say. One of the most practical people I've ever met.
Yes, I was Holland.
What did you ask me when we met a long, long time ago? He asked me for good government. Remember that? That's right. Responsible, good government. And I've always tried to deliver that. I've got one of the best voting records in Congress, okay? I've cast over 8,600 votes in 15 years, close to 8,700 votes. I don't miss many votes. I was one of 4 Republicans who didn't miss a vote in the entire last Congress. I take that seriously. Why? I carry this with me. This is my voting card. If I don't cast a vote, 800,000 East Tennesseans have no say in whether or not a budget passes or a bridge gets named after somebody that lives 100 years ago. I think both are important, but if I don't show up, and I do show up, that is critically important. So I've always remembered that, and I've always remembered what my friend Steve Smith told me in Nashville. He was a great guy. He said, when you're speaking with groups like this who really care about their country, because they wouldn't be here if they didn't, starting companies, bringing businesses, leave them with good news. There's a lot of great news out there. Sure, could I sit here for an hour and talk about gloom and doom? Of course I could. But the reality is there's so many great things going on in this country right now. And because of you, I get to be a part of that. And that means so much to me, because when I'm casting votes, when I'm working in committee and doing those things, and while you're thinking of other questions, I'm going to give you a benefit to what JJ was talking about. Last administration, my father's buried in the National Cemetery. My uncle is buried in the National Cemetery. Brenda's daddy is buried in the National Cemetery. Oldest, largest national cemetery in Chattanooga. It was General Grant's headquarters during the war between the states. It's filling up. It's going to be full in about 3 years, maybe 4 at the most. Good friend of mine, I'll tell you his name. His name is Greg Vidal. He's a state rep, dear friend of mine. He had a beautiful big piece of land. He offered it to the VA at a cut rate price because he loves this country. He's independently wealthy, wanted to give back. The VA said yes. It comes to closing, they don't show up at closing. come back in a month. He comes back in a month. They don't show up at closing. He calls me. He was not in the state. He was not happy. What are you going to do about it, Congressman, to fix this? I'll look into it. I keep an open door policy. Brenda knows this very well. Whether it's a Republican or a Democratic administration, any member of the cabinet can call me. Any member can come to my office and closed door and talk with me. They're going to be treated with respect. They're going to be treated with kindness. And even though we may have differences, we're going to have a civil conversation. I called Secretary McDonough, the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, and I said, please come down to my office. He showed up with the top general over military cemeteries. He looked me in the eye and he said, Congressman, closed door, I have no idea whatsoever what you're talking about. Will you give me some time? Don't go public with this. Give me some time to try to figure it out. Yes, sir, I will. Trust, respect, common courtesy. About 8 months later, knock, 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 he showed up at the door. He said, your folks were right. Our folks were wrong. We're going to sign that contract, and we're going to make sure that the expansion of the National Cemetery is in the great state of Tennessee. Because of that relationship. Now, Secretary McDonough is a great American. He's a Democrat. He's a veteran. He did an honorable job in that role. But if I had beaten him up 8 days a week or treated him with disrespect, he would have never come to that office. He made my job easier because I made his job easier. He got to the truth. I didn't run to the press. I didn't have an I got you moment. And because of that, we're going to have a final resting place probably for the next 300 years in Meigs County, Tennessee. So thank you.
Brenda and Brooke, could you join us as we just close, if you don't mind?
Yes.
Please come on up.
And I would just like to say thank you on behalf of Amaero as a company in Tennessee, as an employer in Tennessee, for all that you do. I also realize it takes a family. And thank you so much for many, many years of service. And thank you, for taking the time to come and join us today.
Well, Brooke and Hank, thank you. You have 50 states you could have chose. You chose the great state of Tennessee. This was not the state of my birth. Brenda grew up here. She was born in Chattanooga, raised in Chattanooga, schooled in Chattanooga, went to the University of Tennessee for 7 years, undergraduate. We met in law school there. What a decision. How fortunate I was at age 20 that they chose me. So that was, just really just an incredible, incredible opportunity. More importantly, when I went back to New York, Philadelphia, and Chicago to look for a job, they wouldn't choose me. They poked fun at me. They said, hey, you went to the University of Tennessee College of Law. Did they ever let you borrow the book? Those were the things that they were telling me. I came back. We opened up a practice in Tennessee, and thank God that's probably one of the greatest decisions I ever made. So thank you for choosing Tennessee, and thank you all for choosing me. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here, and thank you for your support.